Okay, I will call the meeting of the Town of Essex Select Board for Monday, April 15th to order. First order
Recording in
of
progress.
on the agenda is agenda additions or changes. A reminder that if you'd like to pull anything off of consent, this would be the time to do it. First, do we have any changes from staff?
None from staff. I would like to call attention to the agenda. We added that if anybody has, from the public has comments about the consent agenda, to bring that up during public to be heard.
Good. Any changes from the board? Randall?
I would like to request that we pull item C and item E out of the consent agenda.
Okay, anything else? Would someone like to make a motion? Moving on to... You want to make a motion?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
I would move that.
Second.
Okay, so item C and E from the consent agenda. Do you have any particular place you'd like to put them?
As soon as possible. Only take a couple minutes. I don't have any concerns.
Okay. So I would consider putting them as K and L under business. Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. We have approved the agenda. I guess we just did that together to save time. Public to be heard is the next item on the agenda. If you're in the room, obviously you can raise your physical hand. If you are online, you will have a reactions button at the bottom of your screen. If you push that button, it will pop up and you will have the option to raise your virtual hand. As Greg mentioned, if you would like to comment on the consent agenda, please do so during this time or items that are not on the agenda. So at this point in time, is there any public comment? Seeing none, we will move along to the remainder of the items on the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, I make the motion that we approve the consent agenda as amended.
Thank you, Don. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. There is no discussion on this, so all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. And that brings us into the business item portion of our agenda. Up first, presentation of life-saving medals to Essex police officers. And at this point, I will turn it over to Chief White.
Excuse me. Is this going to be okay over here for your phone or on the other side? Okay. Well, first, I just wanted to say thank you to the board for giving us a moment just to do this, these presentations. Public safety is what we do, and saving lives is what we're charged with every day. But unfortunately, we don't often get the chance to actually know that we saved a life. And in cases that we do, I think it's important that we recognize those folks that do that, and in the most public way possible. So that's what I'm hoping to do. And I'm gonna call folks up here. I have two awards to present. And I'm going to call folks up here one at a time, if that's okay. And I just wanted to read a little bit about what these folks have done to get where they are. And I just wanted to say that even though I am very proud of our department every single day that I work with these folks, I cannot be more proud of people who will go out there and do the job that they're asked to do and save someone's life. There's nothing more important that we can do, and hopefully these folks that were saved will live long lives because of what our officers did on these days. I did attempt to make contact with the families to see if they would like to come to tonight's ceremony, but I wasn't able to contact anyone. Unfortunately, all of the methods that we had, including visits to their house, were negative. So first, I'm going to call Corporal Carazza up. Give me 1 second here. So I'm just going to read portion of the nomination letter that was submitted. So on March 3rd, 2024, the officer who made this recommendation was Sergeant Michael Cistolini, and he had just arrived for a shift, and Corporal Carazza was heading out the door. Corporal Carazza informed him that he was headed to a residence just off from Maple Street to assist with a medical call for an unresponsive male at the residence. He then responded to the scene shortly thereafter, and he found members of Essex Rescue, Essex Junction Fire Department, Essex Junction First Response, and the police department. All were involved in the medical care. What had happened prior to him arriving was there was a male who was found to be not responsive and not breathing with no pulse. And Corporal Carazza immediately began CPR. And because of his efforts of doing that, the gentleman is now alive today. Essex Rescue arrived there and were able to transport him to the hospital. And today his family still has him with him. And what prompted this was Lieutenant Gregg, who is a fire lieutenant with the city fire department, had also prompted a letter. And what he said about Corporal Carazza, because he was also on scene, was that his actions were of direct, meaningful aid in saving the life of a patient in conditions that were not dangerous to the rescuers involved. So, Corporal Carazza, I'd like to present you with the EPD Life Saving Award. Congratulations. Thank you. And now if I could have Officer Koshlayev join me up here. So Officer Koshlayev is also a member of the city fire department, so he has got some more training than many police officers, but on this day he was performing his duties as an EPD member. And just to read a little bit about this recommendation came from Corporal Wooten, who is in the room. So he says on March 22nd, 2024, at 23:22 hours, which is 11:22 at night, Officer Koshlayev and himself were called to another unconscious male call at Autumn Pond. When we arrived with rescue, dispatch updated that CPR had already started. Officer Koshlayev and I entered the apartment and found the male on his bed in the living room. It was clear that CPR had not already been started. So they immediately removed the male from his bed and onto the floor and then checked for a pulse. After finding no pulse, Officer Koshlayev immediately began CPR. The two of them continued to work on the individual until rescue arrived and subsequently got the person back. And today he is still alive with his family as well. So 2 in 1 month. This is unbelievable. So if I can present this, I'd like to present you with the EPD Life Saving Award. Congratulations. Thank you. And that is all I have. Again, I know you have a busy schedule, so I appreciate everyone being here. And I see members of the public and members of our community advisory board, members of the city council. I appreciate everyone coming to see this.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
I
You're very
appreciate
welcome. Anytime that I can share something like that, I will definitely do that.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
And thank you both for your actions and your service. Good to start off with good news.
I'm sitting here crying.
With that, we will move along to business item 6B, interview and possible appointment of volunteers to serve on the Housing Commission. First, just in order on the agenda, I have Carolyn Ellenberger. if you're in the room, if you would.
She's online.
She's online. Hi, Carolyn.
Hello.
So for the Housing Commission, we do have 2 vacant seats currently. We have 2 folks before us this evening. So Carolyn, I'd ask you just to start, tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're interested.
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Carolyn Ellenberger. I live in Essex. I actually grew up in Essex Junction and went through the school system here and moved away for a while. Came back about 2 years ago, and I'm now a homeowner here in Essex. And I feel very, very fortunate. I know it's a luxury to have housing these days. And I'm very concerned about the housing situation, the crisis we're all hearing about. And I'm looking to see how I can contribute to improving the housing situation here in my hometown, in my community, and giving others the opportunity for that. I don't have a lot of housing experience aside from being a homeowner, as I said. I've been a homeowner for quite a while, other places as well. I also serve as a board member on my condo association, so I'm interested. But I am a project manager and I'm very organized and I like to get things done and very results focused. So if I can help in that capacity, I'd be happy to.
First?
What are some things that I know you touched on them, so it's hard to ask a question that you've partially answered. But what are some things that you have in mind that you could bring new ideas or contribute to the commission?
Well, I have seen a lot of people suffering from lack of good housing. So I've seen that aspect of it. My heart goes out to them and I have a lot of compassion for that. And I feel like I can channel that into getting something done. And one thing I'm not totally clear about is exactly how much of an impact the Housing Commission has, what sort of influence they have, but I'm curious to learn more about that and how we community members can make an impact.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. So.
All right, I guess I'll ask one. I'm usually in that seat, so this is weird. Carolyn, thank you for stepping forward. My question is, what is your understanding of what it means to be a public servant?
My understanding, and I will be completely honest, is that I do not have that sort of experience, but from my perspective, I see it as you're putting the community's needs and wishes and above all else, above your own, you're thinking about what does the community need? What do my neighbors need? And how can I help make that happen?
Thank you.
Questions? Carolyn, I guess I will ask the question, turn it back over to you. Do you have any questions for the board?
I do not. I read some of the minutes and the agendas for the Building Commission. I feel like I have a good sense of at least what the last few meetings have been like. So no, I do not.
I guess this was a short interview. We do have 2 openings for 2 positions, as I mentioned. They have been advertised for some time. I do anticipate that we'll probably talk about this. We'll make the decision later on whether we will make the decision after the next interview as far as whether we appoint now or discuss later. But after this meeting, someone from staff should be in touch with you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your interest. Our next applicant, Anna Brulette. Here. Anna, same thing, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about why you're interested.
Sure. Hi there. My name is Anna Brulette. Too loud.
Yeah, don't.
Oh, I'm not supposed to be close to it. Okay. I'm not used to mics. Hi there, Anna Brulette. I also grew up in Essex and have recently returned in the past 2 years after some time away for graduate school, and spent some time in Austin, Texas as well, working after grad school. I currently serve as the Policy and Program Director at Building Bright Futures, which is the state's Early Childhood State Advisory Council. So we really focus on families and young children prenatal to age 8, and all of the needs that they have, including housing, but also really focus on childcare policy, nutrition, mental health, etc. I was interested in joining the commission for similar reasons as Carolyn. Have had a lot of different experiences with our current housing system, and am certainly aware, both personally and professionally, of the stress that housing in Vermont right now can cause. It was really challenging for me to return to Vermont from Austin and pay the same amount for a lot less space. I have been a renter my whole life until this November. I had the opportunity to buy a home through Champlain Housing Trust Shared Equity Program. So I'm familiar with that process and what an incredible opportunity that can be for folks who are currently unable to buy on kind of the open or traditional housing market. And had an incredible experience working with that team, and now live over in the Fort, the Officers Row condos, thanks to that program. So I'm really just interested, given both professional and personal experiences, both as a renter and now as a shared equity homeowner, as well as my interest in really serving young children and their families and housing as a priority within that work.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any questions from the board?
If you were appointed to the commission and they wanted to do something and you did not agree with that, how would you deal with that?
That's a great question. I think that I would continue to pull in any, evidence or stories, any types of data that I had to continue to advocate for my position. But if as a whole, if there was if there was some type of consensus that I was not a part of, I would support my fellow commission members in that. But I think I would continue to present my perspective until that was no longer serving the group.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if my question still works.
Give it a shot, Ethan.
All right, I'm gonna try. I slacked a little bit, so I tried to use the same question for both of you, but I have a little bit more of a question. Do you have a pretty well understanding of the makeup of the Housing Commission? And to the other side of my same question is, do you have any general ideas of things that you could, ideas you could bring to the table to help solve some of the problems that were...
Yeah, I it's a great question. I think from my perspective, it's really about understanding kind of the levers of change that something like the Essex Housing Commission has versus the Vermont State Legislature or the federal government. So I'm, given my professional experience, I'm fairly well versed in policy making and kind of those different spheres of influence, and think I could add value to it because of that. But kind of fast forwarding, I think my question for you all would be like what success for the Housing Commission looks like from the Select Board's perspective. So perhaps I'm turning that question back on you a little bit, but yeah, those are my thoughts, if that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Ethan asked 2 questions.
Okay. So what is, I'll ask the same question I asked before. What is your understanding of what it means to be a public servant?
Yeah, I think that Carolyn did an excellent job with this question. I professionally am really committed to being in a mission-driven role and can't see myself in any other type of work. I think it is very much about putting one's own, kind of bias and personal lived experience aside when that is what makes sense, and really looking out for the greater good, and then the well-being of one's neighbors and communities, and really and using one's position of power and privilege to bring voice to those that don't have it. And that speaks to my earlier answer and kind of commitment to doing data-driven work, whether it be telling the story of folks that aren't at the table or bringing kind of statistics to illustrate, the impact of a given policy or problem or challenge.
All right, thank you.
So you already asked one question.
Mm-hmm.
I'll answer that not on behalf of the select board, but the Housing Commission was recently, in past months, gave us an update on what they were doing. They are still doing that work. Success to me looks like continuing to do that work in concert with the Housing Commission and other partners, and essentially bringing back a path forward, whether it be through inclusionary zoning or other methods to move those conversations forward. And do you have any other questions?
Great. No, that was really helpful. Thank you.
All right. And same thing, we will decide right after this whether to appoint or discuss later. You're welcome to stick around to hear what that answer is. Or if not, well, I should say, you would also be hearing from a member of staff after the meeting.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Board discussion. Would we like to, well, first let's discuss. Yes.
The staff recommendation is to wait, I guess, in case there are other applicants before because these are these seats that are expiring that we're filling or are they empty seats?
Let me check. They've been open for a while, so I think
so these
we
are
might have
open
just used our
seats.
standard language in there for
Okay.
appointments. I think if you're ready to appoint tonight, that's
Okay.
totally fine by
Okay,
staff.
okay, so it's not for seats that are ending in June, it's for seats that are already open. I was thinking.
They are
Correct.
2 vacant seats now.
Okay.
And they've been advertised for over 6 months.
They have had, Housing Commission has had some challenges with quorum because they're down 2 people.
Good.
With that, I would like to make a motion. I would like to make the motion to appoint Anna Brule and Carolyn Ellenberger to the Housing Commission for the 2 vacant seats, with remaining terms ending with a new appointed term, July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2027.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded.
Can I clarify that?
Yes.
Is there a way to appoint them now until June 30th, 2027?
Yeah.
Can I say
Yes.
that? And
You
can you write that down instead? You know what I mean? That's what threw me off, because like we might as well appoint for now and then. Does that make sense?
Right, because the 2 open positions go through 2027, right?
I think they.
Correct. They are vacant
Yeah.
now. The remainder of the term does end on June 30, 2024. I think it's just a question for the board whether you would like the individuals to be back in a month and a half.
Yeah.
Okay. Dawn, is that
Right,
Okay with you?
right, from starting now until 2027 is fine with me.
okay? Discussion?
I mean, I would just note that you should appoint them for the remainder of the term, and then have them come back in, or have them submit another application and re-up again for the proper term. We're tending to get into the habit of, when we get folks, we appoint them for the remaining term and a whole new term. Necessarily a bad thing, but there's still 3 months. Have somebody else that can hop in for that. I don't know what the procedure is staff-wise for that, or policy.
You want to?
Yeah, there's no real policy in place. For a number of years, we were just appointing people as they came, Select Board was appointing people as they came forward for a 3-year term, or in some cases a 4-year term. Because of the turnover, and when we weren't tracking which terms were rolling over, we were running into issues where we'd have years where nobody was for reelection, appointment. Years where there were, 4 out of 5 members were up for reappointment. So we've started to stagger the terms. That's why we have the recommended terms in there. I think it's come up recently, probably largely by coincidence, that just some of the vacant seats have terms that are ending in a couple months. So we've adjusted, and rather than having people come back in a month or two later, this is what the board's done. There's no policy in place. It's just been recent practice.
I guess I would just note that I would be more comfortable personally if we appointed them for the remainder of the term and then not require them to come back in, but do reappointment if they want. I mean, if you appoint somebody now and they want to get off in a month and a half, then they're the wrong person. It's just a matter of, because there are going to be some seats. I would make that.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of appointing these two individuals through June 30, 2027, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 4-1. Congratulations. Carolyn, if you're still here, congratulations.
Thank you.
And moving along to our next business item 6C, interview volunteers to serve on the ZBA. To note, there is one seat that also expires on 6/30/2024. And I'm just pulling up the first on our list, Trevor Williams.
Yes. Hi. I'm already on the zoning board. I think it's my term is expiring. I've just been on it for a year, and I just thought I would reapply. And I'm also on the planning board too. So, so my background is that I'm a retired professor of civil engineering at Rutgers University, and I found it very interesting to be on the zoning board and the planning board, but I don't know what else I can tell you. I spoke a long time when I was here last year, so I thought I'd keep it brief tonight. So, yeah.
Sounds good. Questions?
What has your experience been in working on both boards?
Well, it's interesting. It's been good. My background, I know traffic engineering, highway engineering, and certainly that's helpful for the planning board and and in particular when various cases come up before the planning board and they talk about those things. The zoning board I find very interesting. I did not have as much experience with zoning as I did with planning, but I can see that it's important that the zoning laws get upheld, so that I could see now from my year there's possibility for a lot of sort of development or things to be done that are unsightly or don't fit in with a neighborhood and things like that. So I've come to believe that both the zoning and the planning, it's very important to see that the various regulations are followed. And it's the U.S. People want to do things and develop things, but I think it's good that the town of Essex has these various laws in place, particularly things like scenic overlay and things like that, which I think are great and, keep the quality of life here very high.
Thank you.
Have you found yourself in any disagreements with the zoning board, and how did you come to a conclusion?
Well, the zoning board really hasn't had many cases in the year. There's really just one or two in the past year, and the the ones that I've seen, it was a pretty, the cases, there was a consensus. It was obvious what the right thing to do was. So I found it easy to, everybody agreed on the zoning board about what the decision should be. So I think it's good. I think the people who serve on the zoning board now are really good people.
To add on to that a little bit, how did you guys come to your conclusion?
Well, the one that got turned down, it was one that got turned down that sticks in my mind, was that we're looking for a zoning variance. And the reasons for wanting it were not that strong. And then the thing that really solidified it was the fact that there was people in the neighborhood who objected to it as well. So the fact that the reasons were not very good, like fitting cars in the garage, and then local people right next door are worried about runoff and things like that, that I think that made it clear that it was something that shouldn't get a variance. And I mean, of course, you realize, you'd like to accommodate everybody, but you can't sometimes, particularly where this was in a development where the houses are closer together. And, I mean, if it's out in the country, that particular thing would not have been as important.
Eminently cool.
No, I'm good.
Actually, what is your, you sort of answered this, but do you prefer the planning commission or the ZBA?
Well,
understanding that the ZBA is transitioning to a DRB.
Right. Probably with my background, the DBA is more appropriate for me. Although I will say that I like the planning part of the planning board as well. So, but if I had to pick one, I guess it would be the DBA.
Okay, the DRB.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I don't know what I said.
Alphabet soup. Okay, because we will be, going through a change sometime before, I believe it's January 1st, 2025, to make that transition. So.
Okay. Yeah.
And do you have any questions for us?
I don't. I guess my only question, this is a 3-year term. Is that, well, it's all going to get,
Right.
yeah, as long as it takes.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's my only question.
We'll have that discussion when we have a transition plan in place.
Okay.
With the DRB.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
And the same holds true. We'll have a discussion after this, and you'll either find out this evening during the meeting, or someone will be in touch.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Stephanie Bixby. Hey. Come on up and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested.
Hi, I'm a resident of Essex. I purchased my home in 2020 with my husband. I currently am the rental assistance director at the Burlington Housing Authority. So I deal with codes of federal regulation on a daily basis, and that is my job to implement those, is to read those laws and those regulations and implement what the Housing Authority has set up for its rental assistance program. I have to make those decisions and look at each case based on its merit, its extenuating circumstances, and what the regulation says that we are required to do under the program. I've been looking for something to be more involved in my community. I looked at the ZBA and said, that kind of suits what I do. I enjoy reading federal codes of federal regulation and interpreting them, and then discussing them and implementing them. So I thought my skill set would lend very well to this board and be able to expand my horizon a little bit more than just housing.
Questions from the board?
If the applicant came before the zoning board and you did not agree with the rest of the board, how would you deal with it?
I deal with that on a daily basis. You know, you're respectful. You state your case, and if that's just not the way the wind is going, you respectfully just go, you know, you say your piece. And I'm not a big proponent of being disrespectful or rude. Everybody has their say. It's a collaborative, and that doesn't always mean consensus is the best route to move the ball forward. So you try to sway people, and if you can't, you read the room and you go along with, well, you don't go along, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I stick to my guns, but in a respectful way. And if that's the way that the board sees it, I'm not going to hold a grudge, and we got to move forward.
But you would still voice your opinion.
I would still voice my opinion. I don't think it does nobody any service if you don't voice your opinion. And I always feel that it's always good to have a devil's advocate in the room, even if that's not really how you're looking at thing, to be the person to say, have we looked at it from this perspective? Because if we all just agree, that's not always the best approach either.
Thank you.
I was gonna ask how she would form a decision in a contentious matter, but I think she knows the answer.
Sometimes you have to like just, you know, take a beat and take a moment and really review what it goes over. You also just have to go back to what the regulation states. Like, the end of the day, you have to take out in some form your personal feeling about something if you're on a board that's applying a law, and that is the law that has to be followed. So I don't always agree with the federal regulations of my rental assistance program. That's not my job. My job is to apply that regulation consistently and fairly based on the merits of the case.
That's the perfect answer for the ZBA.
Kendall, Ann.
Have you had a chance to review Essex planning and zoning regulations?
I have not done that. I look forward to doing that if I am, you know, chosen to do it. That's, you know, when you take that, I'm going to take that time and review it. I have a 600-page manual that sits on my desk every day. It is my Bible, and I kind of enjoy looking through. So one of those things where you don't memorize those regulations, you look them up. You learn how to use your manuals and your tools to answer those questions.
All right, so we have an approved charter change, which moves us from a planning commission and zoning review board to a planning commission and a design review board. Roles kind of shift around in there. It's about, what, 8 months away? 7.5 months? July or January 1st of next year. Given that the ZBA would be going away, what are your thoughts about where you might want to end up?
Good question. You know, I'm open to change. I'm open to doing something different. The reason I wanted to join the ZBA or join some form of town committee, I can't really run for anything in what I do. There's strict regulations on what I do for a living. I can't run for any type of office. I can only volunteer. So I would be interested in the challenge of what that would look like and seeing if my skill set could be of help in it. So I'm intrigued. I think development and review is something that we hear a lot in the news. I'm in housing. I hear all the time about Act 250 and zoning laws and development and planning and what that looks like. So I very much have an interest in it and in what this community will look like in the future.
All right, thank you.
Do you have any questions for us?
What are you guys all looking for in the person to join the ZBA and the DRB to transition to?
Somebody that uses the regulations to form decisions.
And for a little more detail, Andy mentioned the Development Review Board. So currently, the Planning Commission not only does the planning, but they hear applications for development. The ZBA handles just appeals.
Variances
Simplifying.
too. Yeah.
Variances, simplifying. Conditional uses, things like that. The approved charter change, planning would focus solely on the planning. The DRB would be what the application arm of the Planning Commission does now. So that would sit in a different body.
Basically, you're looking at the application and applying the regulation to make sure that whatever they're applying for meets what the law in that area of the town would.
Right. So it's sort of a differentiation of duties. So, you know, planning and then the enforcement, not enforcement, but application of that code in a separate body.
Not anything that I am not used to. I operate 6 different federally regulated housing programs with their own unique wants and needs.
Wow.
All right. Thank you for your time. We're going to have a discussion here in just a few seconds about what we do next. You're welcome to stay around, even if we go into executive later. Welcome to stay around to see what the result of that is. Regardless, someone will be in touch with you.
Great,
tomorrow. Thank you. As a reminder, we have 1 seat open. Expires 6:30. What's the board's pleasure?
Greg has his hand up first.
Sorry.
This is one, so it's, the seat is filled right now, the term is coming up to an end. The staff would recommend where you do keep this one open, you don't make that appointment. Doesn't have to get filled immediately. See if any other applicants come forward over the 4 months.
And that would include reappointment.
Yes.
There's still 2 seats open though? There's 1 seat open.
This one.
So there's 1 seat that's
This
going to be open.
one that's expiring.
There are no seats open right now.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Right, this is a
The
question.
person who
whether to-
interviewed,
This is a question whether to reappoint Treffer or to appoint somebody else effective July 1st. And so
not to fill the seat that's expiring.
That's his seat.
The current seat is Trevor's seat, and that doesn't expire until June 30th. The staff's recommendation is to keep it open until it's closer to the vacancy date of July 1st.
So we're still of the term.
Trevor's term.
There is no,
You know,
wait,
Yeah, there's no opening right now.
But there will be 2 openings.
No. It's just 1 seat.
basically, we're entering interview season now for that June 30th, so that you don't have to interview everyone on the one meeting right before June 30th. Some of these are just coming in a little earlier because to help spread around the love of the interviews. So that's what this one is. Are there any current openings on planning?
I believe there's 1, but I can find out.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. I guess I'd like to discuss later.
Be the ant and the sugar bowl,
Okay.
but I have some questions.
I don't think I've ever heard that saying before.
Leave it to Kendall to find it.
Sorry. Okay, so absent a motion and hearing that, we will discuss in executive when we get there. Up next, volunteers to serve on conservation and trails. We have Paul Davis. Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Come
for
on
having me.
up. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested.
I'm Paul Davis. I moved to Essex from Wilmington, North Carolina in July 2022. Chapin Road now. It seemed like within a couple weeks, a month, I was in this room attending a planning commission meeting because they were talking about adding a development just down the road from me, and I wanted it to keep with the scenic resource overlay. So I kind of got to know the place a little bit, and I've always had an interest in climate change and conservation and tandem with that, and it's mostly consisted of me worrying and reading articles and not doing much beside the individual actions, wanting to get involved on a community level for some time. I looked into the different committees. I saw there's an energy committee and a trails, conservation trails committee, and I went to the CTC. First meeting was probably about a year ago, and I kind of just kept showing up as a member of the public. Probably went to 3 or 4. Went to the Indian Brook cleanup, and I just would like to sign on.
Questions from the board?
Do you bring any special skills or experience to the Conservation Trails Committee?
I wish I could say I had special skills or experience in that particular area. I do have curiosity and interest. I'd like to know more, especially about in the last meeting they were talking about open lands and the tax. It's like an incentive, but tax adjustment. Word for it, but programs that incentivize conservation for people who have large amounts of land and don't plan on developing it, don't want to develop it.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, I'm interested in that and seeing how we can promote that more. And I don't know, maybe there are adjustments that could be made or more programs that could be added to further promote that kind of behavior.
Here.
Being that you've been attending the meetings regularly, what are some ideas you have for change or action?
So again, I'm kind of new to this, but I'm curious about, like, there are towns that have land trusts. I'm curious about what those are and how those differ from just having conservation funds set aside for land acquisition or using the open land tax incentive. So I don't come with knowing much about that, but I'm think in my role I would like to sort of call up other towns and see what they do and understand that. In the last meeting, they were talking about making a sort of a flyer or handout to make the open lands tax. I don't have quite the right word for it, but the tax incentive easier to understand, and I would like to get involved in that because I want to understand it better. Because I don't think it's something that a lot of people know about.
You had a chance to review the conservation easement plan?
I reviewed the 1989 package. I think it was assembled by grad students at the University of Vermont. It was recommendations on what to do to preserve open lands. The 2008 document that was also talking about the different open land in the area. Read I haven't read every word of the town plan, but I went through it and read the interesting parts and skimmed through the tough stuff. And so I've been through the town plan as well. Those are the documents I've been through. Mm-hmm.
All right. What is your understanding of what it means to be a public servant?
Luckily, I got to prepare for this question because I was listening in. But it made me think of a public servant. Made me think of Vermont and billboards. When people ask why we moved to Vermont, one of the random answers I like to give is no billboards. And to me, the mentality there is a billboard benefits very few to the detriment of many. Vermont said, no, we don't need to do that. And to me, a public servant is a human version of that concept. It's how can I benefit people in general, or the people of the community in this case, and not think short term and
Okay, thank you.
Last question. Do you have any questions for us? Greg, I see that the terms, there are 3 seats, they all expire 6/30/2024. So is this the same recommendation to interview and hold until we're closer to?
Correct. There is one opening that's available now on the Conservation and Trails Committee that expires June of 2025. They do not have the quorum issues that the Housing Commission has had for scheduling. As far as I'm aware, I also do not know if there's any other new applicants who have applied at this point. I have to find that out.
Pleasure.
That was gonna be my question because I understood it better this time than before. But yeah, there's 3 more seats that are gonna be, and we haven't had the opportunity for members who are currently serving to either reapply or not apply, and the first of many, hopefully.
Everybody okay with that?
Waiting for more interviews? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay.
So what are we doing?
Same as last, since there is 1 vacancy, but we have 3 seats whose terms don't expire until 6/30. So not appointing at this point and waiting for more applications to potentially come in.
I'd hear in June, July.
Closer in June, likely.
Be in June, yeah.
Correct. So Paul, thank you for your time.
Yep.
And we'll be in touch in probably about 2 months
All right, thank you.
at the latest.
But just a point of order.
Mhm.
Greg said that there's a term that's vacant now that expires in 5. Why wouldn't we have 3 more openings coming up?
Yeah, he said that he doesn't sure if there was more applications currently.
Maybe more applications than there are seats available, but if it's the will of the board to appoint this evening, I think that we can
No, I'm just
definitely do that.
asking for it.
Andy?
I think the concern is that Paul was able to attend tonight.
Mhm.
There may be other applicants that haven't yet been able to attend, right? And the other question, I don't know if the opening has been advertised for the requisite number of days that we prefer to have
Since
things.
January.
Oh, since January. Okay, so I guess it has probably. But yeah, I guess the question is if there's more applicants, then it would be unfair to.
I don't know.
Don't know.
I should have mentioned that the Housing Commission appointments, those are the only 2 applicants we've had, and that's been
Well, if this opening's been posted since January, I would say,
right.
But there might be, but they said there might be other applicants. That's the.
for the
thing.
other
But
3 seats that are open, Andy, there's none for this one, other than this applicant.
So I don't know that.
Oh.
That I have to get confirmation. The Housing Commission, there were no other applicants. That was part of why staff was comfortable appointing those.
And the Housing Commission is also having issues meeting quorum.
Yeah, I know.
That was a little more time sensitive.
Yeah. And I didn't see anything in the memo that says that there's an open position on the committee. I only saw the 3 terms ending June 30th. And it says 2023. It's supposed to be 2024.
I think it's in the issue. A volunteer for a vacant seat.
No.
Yeah, we can look to clean up some of the issues and,
'Cause I didn't know there was an opening at all. I thought it was just vacancies or expiring terms. You know what I mean? Not vacancies, sorry. But that was
Does this
my-
discussion change anything for the board? Do we still want to hold off? Okay.
I think we should hold off because there may be other applicants, and if you know, if it's appropriate, if we can find out if there are other applicants, we could revisit this in the next meeting if there are none.
Yes. Okay. Next agenda item, interview volunteer to serve on the Economic Development Commission.
Not here.
There is one seat expiring 6/30/2024. Are there any other vacancies, or is it just that one?
I believe it is just that one. Let me double check.
And Tanisha is online.
Yes.
Looks like there's just the one seat that's opening up.
Okay.
July.
Okay. So, Tanisha, are you online? Welcome.
No.
Tanisha, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in the position.
Sorry. I've been on the economic development. I think this is I was renewed last year, and it was just for 1 year. So my seat is coming up for vacancy or whatnot. So I was reapplying. We're doing a lot of work from the previous years, but we're getting it done now. So I still wanted to serve and complete the work that I was started.
As to why, and I don't, Tanisha, I love you, but last year the appointment was for 1 year because you were a village resident. My
Yes,
question
and I
is,
was told
ahead.
that I couldn't apply, but then I got an email that was stating that I could apply, so I applied again.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Somebody want to explain that to me?
Yeah, so last year, the board took up the question as far as whether we wanted to in place restrictions around who could serve, whether it just had to be town residents, and we landed at an individual basis. There wasn't any across the board decisions made as far as whether we would only consider residents of the town. Is that what you were gonna?
Yes.
Okay.
And so when Tanisha reached out to me and asked if she could apply, I told her that yes, the board had decided that residency was not a requirement, that she could apply.
Go ahead.
Any questions from the board?
What's the most impactful or meaningful accomplishment that you've been a part of since you've been on the board?
So I'm doing that work now. We have a packet for residents and for business owners that we have set up that would be issuing out and getting complete. And I'm working with Jean on that for a couple of things for them to have information and knowledge of things in the area, what's closed, what schools, what other businesses are there. So we're trying to basically get the businesses, the new businesses that are out there, get word that they're there. Because some of the businesses we didn't even know they existed.
Thank you.
Kendall, Andy?
No, I'm good.
You're good. I did have one question other than my usual. Do you have any questions? In your application, you indicated that you wanted to expand on increasing the community's involvement. How do you foresee yourself doing that?
So we just had a little thing for your we were at the select board at the school. So we had a lot of people pass our tables. So I wanted to do more of expanding, just letting people know about the EDC when we go to different places. We're showcasing businesses right now, so we kind of want them to get involved as well. So we've been asking questions about them being involved and on the seats or whatnot, or giving their opinion about different things. So that's what we've been doing.
Okay, last question. Do you have any questions for us?
No, I asked him when I asked Greg, because I was unaware that I could apply again, so I was happy that I could. So
All right. Given that this one seat doesn't expire until 6:30, does the board wish to take action or hold until closer to the term start date? I will also note that the vacancy has only been advertised for 30 days as of today.
I'd like to hold.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay. Tanisha, when it gets closer, you will hear from somebody.
okay, thank you.
Thank you for applying.
Mhm.
Item 6F, consider the appointment of representative and alternate to the Chittenden Solid Waste District, Alan Nye. Come on up.
Sorry.
Alan, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested.
Okay, I have been serving on the Waste District Board for either 20 or 22 years. We couldn't find somebody when I was on the Select Board, so I was on the Select Board and also on the Waste District back in those early days. I'm a civil engineer by trade, and I think that provides a little bit of background and training when issues come up that are part of the Waste District. I'm also the vice chair and have been the vice chair for a number of years of the board, and it's something that I enjoy doing. And for a while, I was both the Junctions rep and the Towns rep until the separation, and then they appointed somebody other than myself. But just enjoy it and hope you reappoint me.
Questions from the board?
I was gonna ask him if he enjoyed it or just does it for this long because nobody else steps up, but he said he enjoyed it, so I'm happy with that answer.
Do you have any concerns with their future plans and financing?
Yes and no. I guess it's the same with any municipal organization that needs money. Where's it going to come from? And we've gotten, and Sarah's going to be talking later tonight about the budget. We've run into some issues with the cost of the recycling facility, and I think they're looking through alternatives right now with respect to that. The price of everything just seems to be going up, if it's from steel or concrete to the equipment that needs to be in it. But the board is fairly conservative, and we discuss monetary issues. The cost, I think you're also going to hear from Sarah tonight, the cost of the solid waste management fee has been stable for 12 years. And the board and the full-time staff are looking to raise that in the next coming year. But not a lot. I mean, it's not going to be a significant, but I always worry about, where money is going to come from. I always try to, when there is an issue that I think is contentious, I try to come to the board here and get into public to be heard to just, see what's there and try to, keep you informed of those things that appear to be fairly contentious.
Thank you.
Other board questions? Go for it.
How many years have you actually been on the solid waste?
It's either 20 or 22, I think.
If you would indulge me a little bit, notice that the solid waste district charges the employees a percentage of the salaries for their health insurance. That's rather unusual. Was that contentious when that came about?
No. I think I was on the finance committee back when those things were being discussed, or we discussed it again one time. It was the general manager who felt that, he ought to pay more money than somebody working at the drop-off center. And we discussed that in depth, and it worked fairly well, and it seems to have worked, continues to work. So it gets programmed into the budget every year, and so the general manager pays more money for her insurance than a person at the drop-off center that requires the same coverage. And it seems to work very well.
So if the board would indulge me for a follow-up question to that, as a past select board member, you could compare the two. Did the district have to make up more money on the premiums? Because right now, the employees pay a percentage of their premium.
Percentage of the salary.
Yeah, well, your employees pay 3.5% of their salary. So there could be a discrepancy there. I just wondered if there was a big discrepancy.
Well, if the general manager is making, $100,000 and the drop-off center person is making $40,000, there is a differential there between, what they're paying for health insurance.
And the board budget makes up that difference?
The annual budget makes up the difference between what the employees pay and what is required by the insurance company.
Yep. And I think we'll get into that with our next agenda item as well.
Thank you.
Andy?
I was just going to say, aren't we interviewing rather than? Yeah.
Say again?
I think the budget is on the next agenda item, so it's a little.
And I see Sarah's on.
Right, we're getting into it right now. I'm trying to sit on my hands because I don't sit there anymore.
Did you have a question for the
Madam, go ahead. Madam Chair, I have one statement, though. I do want to thank Alan for his many years of serving, because it sounds like that's a challenging job to have.
Yes. Alan, do you have any questions for us?
No, I just, I guess one of the things that I tried to incorporate when I was on the select board is we try to get an evaluation of our, volunteers. And I could never get, 3 people to agree with me, on that. But, if you are having issues with me, I would love to hear it and, know what to change. And as I said, when there are controversial issues, I try to come in and run them by you, because really I just represent you guys, and you guys represent the town. So the one other thing that's kind of, I think is helpful is that we have members on the board that are new to government and everything else, and I always relate how I relate to the Essex Selectboard.
Always a good perspective to have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming back to the board. This will expire on May 31st. So a month and 15 days from now. Vacancy has been advertised since March 15th. What is the will of the board?
3 days.
Days today. Andy?
I'd like to make a motion that the select board appoint Alan Nye as our representative to the Chittenden Solid Waste District. And we also want to appoint our alternate.
I'm happy to serve again. Alan makes it very easy.
I'd like to appoint Marguerite Ladd as our alternate.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion?
That's for 2 years, right?
Yes,
Yes.
they do it by vocabulary, alphabet, and years. So,
Hearing no discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, opposed nay. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. May I sit here for the presentation?
Sure.
Yeah, looks like Sarah is online.
Yep, and our next agenda item, Sarah, you are online, so we will turn it right over for you for the CSWD proposed FY25 budget. Welcome.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I would, if get permission for Jen Holiday, my colleague, to share her screen because I've been experiencing some technical issues with some freezing. So if for some reason I freeze and go away, Jen will be able to move forward. So as Alan mentioned, and thank you again for reappointing Alan, he has been a remarkable board member for us. He's been really instrumental over the years at presenting a great point of view on a multitude of issues, and I really rely on his guidance for a lot of things. So thank you for giving me access to his resources for another couple of years at least. Again, my name is Sarah Reeves. I'm the Executive Director for Chittenden Solid Waste District, and we are a municipal district created by our member towns, the 18 cities and towns in Chittenden County, to manage the solid waste that is generated by our residents, our businesses, institutions, and our guests. Next, please. Again, a little bit more of who we are. Really what I like to do on this slide is show kind of the different buckets of our revenue. And this is our example from our fiscal 23. It says unaudited, but that is the audited version of that chart. And we receive our revenue in three main areas: user fees or tip fees. So those are the fees that are paid directly to us by our customers at our drop-off centers, at our organics recycling facility, materials recycling facility, to manage the waste that they bring to us. Another section is our solid waste management fee. That is the fee that is charged to haulers when they bring material that needs to be disposed at the landfill. They are charged a per ton rate for that waste that is being disposed. And then material and product sales, and that is the revenue that we receive for the recycling that we market, for the compost products that we produce, and for local color paint. Next, please. I also, based on some past feedback from the different councils and select boards, like to talk about how we're doing. Again, this is fiscal 23, and I'd like to point you over to column number 3. That is the amount that was actually landfilled. Out of all of the waste that was generated in Chittenden County in fiscal 23, just under 120,000 was actually disposed in the landfill. And of that, about half could have been further diverted. And that's where we focus most of our attention. We focus on waste reduction, but really it's how can we get the material that is currently being landfilled that can be recycled or composted or otherwise diverted. So that is the challenge, and that's where we are putting a lot of our activities. Our fiscal 25 income in a snapshot, again, is just under 16 million. And again, showing these buckets, the majority of our revenue is coming from tipping fees or user fees. Solid waste management fee revenue projected at about 24%. And that sale of materials, that does tend to fluctuate. The bulk of that, that percentage is from the materials recycling facility. And that revenue fluctuates because we simply do not control the markets. So we can't dictate what price we receive for the material. Next, please. I want to also show our expenses in this format as well, to show kind of where the bulk of our expenses are. It should not be a surprise to the select board that payroll is a large expense for us. It does continue to grow. But materials management is also a very, very large expense. And that is, when we talk about materials management, we're talking about the fees that we pay to companies, mainly to haulers, to move materials, move solid waste, recycling, et cetera, to ultimate disposition, either to the landfill or to market. So that's what, and that also incorporates the fee that we pay to Casella to operate the materials recycling facility on our behalf. Next, please. Our bottom line this year looks a little bit different than in past budgets that I've brought to the town. Here we are showing a deficit. We're showing a shortfall. And I will explain a little bit later on in a few moments how we're going to address that. Next, please. A quick snapshot compared this year to next year. So this current fiscal 24-25. You're seeing that we're not anticipating, we're not budgeting for a large increase in revenue, just a modest, almost flat revenue change. The expenses are what is driving this budget. And a large portion of the equipment and fleet increase, which is that 66% increase in that line item, is directly related and attributed and budgeted to the current materials recycling facility. And I will explain more about that in a moment as well. Next, please. So how we're going to manage the shortfall is by drawing down slightly on reserves. That is, of course, only if everything goes according to budget as drawn out. So if it does, then we would be tapping our undesignated reserve to cover the shortfall. However, as Alan mentioned, we conservatively budget. So we conservatively under budget certain income, we conservatively over budget expenses. We, again, because we don't have control over what we receive as far as a per ton price for the recycling commodities, we tend to be quite conservative there. Although we did adjust our projection upward based on feedback from our finance committee. They felt we were being too conservative. So we nudged it up a little bit in reflection of that feedback. We are also actively sourcing additional tons for both the materials recycling facility and for the organics recycling facility to make sure that we are operating as efficiently as possible and maximizing those facilities. On the expenses, we always tend to over budget on the wages and benefits, particularly on the benefits side. And that is because whenever we have additional folks budgeted in at the district, before we hire them, we actually don't know who they are. So we have to budget for example, a full family medical plan. That is, as you know, the most expensive benefit plan that you could get. But because, again, we don't know their circumstance, we're going to assume that they would have that highest level of need. It doesn't always come in that way, but we have to plan for it. One of the items that we routinely do not spend fully is that community cleanup fund. And that is something where we want to spend that fully. We want all of our communities to fully utilize the annual amount that they have in that fund for their projects locally. And I know Alan has worked on that diligently over the years to find projects and to source projects to use those funds. Next, please. So as Alan mentioned, included in this budget is an increase to the solid waste management fee. We have not increased this fee since fiscal year 2013. We are going from $27 a ton up to $30 a ton. So a modest increase given what all the increases that we've all experienced over the years. The impact per household, if we were to spread that out over all the households in Chittenden County, would be under 30 cents per month. And we took that at the pounds per capita generated on an annual basis per household and multiplied that by the persons per household. A way that customers can mitigate their potential exposure to that increase, you can really feel that at the drop-off centers. So that's where our customers have the greatest ability to manage any potential impact. The increase is included in the price of bags at the drop-off centers. But if you're not generating as much waste and you can reduce the number of bags of trash that you generate and have to pay for, then you are therefore reducing your impact to that fee. So the revenue generated by this fee, we need to help supplement our closed landfill reserve fund. And I will talk more about that a little bit later as well. Next, please. The materials recycling facility is also seeing a modest increase. We are currently charging $85 per ton, increasing to $90 per ton. And this is going to bring the MRF tip fee closer to the average regional tip fee, which is in about that $90 to $120 a ton range. We're still on the lower end of the region, and we're talking the Northeast region in northern New York. This is directly related to the needs of this aging facility. Just about everything in the MRF is at its end of life. And so we knew this was coming. We had hoped to have the new MRF up and running by now, but delays due to COVID really put a wrench in that. So had everything gone according to plan, we would be in the new MRF now, and we would not be seeing these expenses. However, not everything went according to plan. So we're anticipating needing to spend, we're budgeting about $250,000 in that equipment line, specifically for this existing facility. Next, please. Some good news for the organics recycling facility, we are not increasing the tip fee there. It's going to stay at $70 per ton. Our inbound tons, again, we're being a little conservative here. We are actively seeking additional tons, specifically food scraps, to come in and working with folks on diverting some of their food scraps to our facility. We did increase our prices on our compost and compost products. They were on the low end of the regional average. So we are still just about in the middle of the average for those products, still a little bit low on a couple of items, but the sales have remained strong. So the market is bearing the increase in that price. And we are set to, our board will be actually voting on the contamination policy this month. And we are going to be implementing a new contamination policy that is similar to the existing policy with the materials recycling facility. And this will help us to help haulers address ongoing issues for some unwanted materials that we're seeing in the food scrap deliveries. It's another tool in the toolbox for both CSWD and for our haulers. Next, please. More good news, there is no bag increase at our drop-off centers. So we've also added another extra large size kind of contained within that bag pricing. The budget also is reflecting additional hours both in Milton and in Burlington. We are looking to expand the Milton site, and we're looking to reopen Burlington to trash, hopefully by the end of this current fiscal year, that is reflected in the next fiscal year. Next, please. Just a very brief look at some capital projects, the big one being the new materials recycling facility. We are aiming to award the construction contract next month, June at the latest, and then we will be hopefully breaking ground by the end of the summer, early September. And then if we happen to have another mild winter, then we'll be able to work on the construction all year next year, fingers crossed, and then hopefully be up and running about 18 months from now. And on that, down on the fund equity, again, all of the reserve funds are adequately funded with the exception of the closed landfill reserve. We're in about year 28, 29 of a 30-year closure period. So it's not unusual that the fund would be dwindling down at this point. What is unusual is the need, the new need potentially to further treat leachate that is continuing to be generated in that by that landfill. This is coming from the EPA. So you may have seen the news about PFAS being regulated more strictly, particularly in drinking water. We're anticipating something similar coming down the line for wastewater treatment plants. We've been working with the folks at Essex about that, as well as trying to somehow treat PFAS in leachate. So we don't know what that is going to look like yet. We don't know the costs. We do know we don't have enough money in that reserve fund to fund that kind of a project. So the bulk of the increase to the solid waste management fee will be directed to that closed landfill reserve to build that reserve up over the course of the next couple of years, while we all learn kind of what the expectations will be for the need to treat that leachate. Next, please. And as usual, for our charter, our legislative bodies of the member municipalities are asked to vote to approve the district's budget. Every city and town has one vote. It's not weighted by population, so you all have equal votes. And with that, I would like to open it up for questions.
Questions from the board? Andy.
Hey, Sarah, I know you had a preview of my question. one of the things that we hear from some of our residents is concern over the number of trucks that pass through town. And if you sit out here on Route 15, you can oftentimes see up to 3 or 4 tractor trailers of trash headed to Coventry. And then if you wait a number of hours, they turn around and come back. And it's constant. It's all day long, trucks going by. And I know that there's a limited life to the landfill up there, and there's also focus from the legislature to try to address climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm just wondering if CSWD is involved in trying to lobby with how we deal with the fact that we haul all of our trash, the entire state's trash, to the far end of the state. Or as my question is there any way to redistribute those trucks so they're not all going, well, I guess they're not all coming through Essex, not every, so there are multiple ways to get to Coventry. But the closer you get to Coventry, the fewer options there are. And we do seem to have a lot of trucks coming through here. So just wondering what your thoughts are on that, or if there's anything that again, that CSWD is doing, working with the legislature or whomever you need to resolve that.
Yes, thank you for the question. And you're right, you'd asked this last year too. So what I did last year after our meeting was Jen, who's on the line as well, Jen and I spoke with A&R, with folks there, and we had this similar conversation saying, this is not just CSWD staff members thinking this is an issue. We're hearing this from our member towns, and we want to tell you what they're concerned with. So we had a couple of conversations, and then I gave a presentation to my board in September about the landfill, about our landfills that we manage. And out of that presentation, a request came from my board to ask A&R to give the board a presentation, which they did in December. And I meant to send Greg that link to our minutes earlier, and I realized I just sent it too late. But the minutes are on our website, and it was a very robust conversation, a good discussion. So I would ask Greg if you could forward that link to those minutes to the select board. And I made sure that the notes and the minutes were very, very detailed so that anyone could get a really good sense of the conversation and the questions that were asked, very good questions by our board. And to really ask some difficult questions of A&R, of Josh Kelly from the DEC, and to get a sense for exactly what you're talking about, Andy, which is, is anybody even thinking about this? Is anyone talking about this who can have an impact and who can make some changes? And so some good news is that the state's materials management plan is being discussed now. The draft is out now. And in that draft, there is a requirement that the state convene a stakeholder process to discuss disposal options. Because if you read the minutes, you'll see that Josh does say, one of the alternatives is to ship everything out of state. So that does not do anything to take trucks off the road. And it does also, if we were to rail it out of state, that would further burden the rail infrastructure in the state, which is not, which needs some help as well. So, and a lot of my board members did not feel good about that option. Basically sending our problems somewhere else. And there are myriad of problems with that. So, but it was a good conversation, a good discussion, and they acknowledged the need to address this now rather than waiting 10 years, 15 years. The current open area of the landfill has approximately 18 years left of life. And if any new landfill were to be sited anywhere in the state, it's a minimum, if you started now, would be 10 years. So we really have to have the conversation now about alternatives and options. They've heard that. They know that this is a key consideration for our members, for Chittenden County, and they have promised to engage in a stakeholder process. So we will push to be a strong voice in that process. And that is one of the comments Josh had, was what he feels is needed in the discussion are strong municipal voices. So I'm going to say that to you as well, that strong municipal voices are what is needed, particularly at this point in the conversation. So I think that was a long answer to your question, but yes, we are on it, and the activity really was spurred by your question last year, Andy. So I thank you for doing that, and we will stay on top of it.
All right, thank you, Sarah.
Other questions from the board? Questions?
Just ask. You're implementing a lot of new credit cards where you're going to be able to take credit cards. Are you charging the 3% addition to?
We charge for the credit cards. We are taking them at all of our facilities except for Burlington at the moment, but when Burlington comes online, we'll take them there too. And we charge 3% on the credit option. If you use a debit card, there is no.
Sarah, are you still there, or did we lose you? Oh, there you are. Can you hear me now?
I'm back. Okay.
Okay.
Frozen. Apologize.
I did have a I did have a quick question. It was on page 9, but I think it was slide 3. Just because I'm super curious, how do you identify materials that could have been diverted from the landfill?
So that is it. Yes. So that's in the waste composition study, or the waste characterization study. That's is usually done by the state, and they just did a new one. So the last one was 2018. They've done a new one in 2023. The results are not out yet. They should be out hopefully by the end of this month. But that's part of that study is on to identify what portion of the waste is actually recycling, is food scraps, etc. Jen, you've been involved in our previous waste studies. As far as, I don't know if you want to add anything, because you've actually dug into some of this stuff.
Yeah, so CSWD has done numerous waste composition studies in the past, which is essentially the consultant sorts through a sampling of waste that's landfill bound and categorizes it. And so the state has, I think, over 70 categories of material. So they'll have every type of recyclable, food scraps, yard debris, batteries, household hazardous waste. So it's quite interesting. And as you can imagine, very informative for CSWD, where sort of our objective is to get people to divert as much as material as they can. So it really informs us in what we can focus our efforts on, what is actually being landfilled. So it's great information.
We also receive reports from
Actually, going through every single
They do.
thing that goes through.
They dump a truck on the ground and sort through it.
Any other questions, comments from the board? No. With none, I will go ahead and open it up to questions or comments from the public. I see Lorraine Zalum, your hand is up online.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Vice Chair Watt. I'm one of the people that suffers from the trucks. I live right on Route 15. It's untenable. It shakes my house. It's caused issues internally inside of our home, as well as leaks in our bathroom. I don't think people believe that it's that bad, but it really is that bad. Our setback is very close to the road. The home's an old home. It was built in the late 50s. I'm wondering, and I couldn't, by the way, I couldn't download the material, the agenda. I don't know why, but there's an issue, there's an error, so I couldn't read. But are there plans the other issue too, of course, is diesel and the findings that we're seeing around the toxicity and the dangers and lethality, as well as the sound, the noise interruption, have major impacts on health, from heart disease to diabetes and so on and so forth. And the more we learn, the more I see other states start to phase out the diesel trucks and the larger trucks in terms of dealing with noise. do you have plans for electrifying or reducing the size of them? And also, to piggyback on what Chair Pia asked, you also measure if you're reducing the amount of waste in terms of do you have metrics in terms of conserving so that we don't have to throw as much waste? And then how is that done? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. We don't actually haul any material up to Coventry. So no CSWD trucks are contributing to the trucks on the road. However, what we can do and what we do is advocate for alternative fuels and for alternatives to diesel. For the trucks that we do use, we just bought a Ford Lightning, which is a electric pickup. We have gone to electric screeners at our compost facility. So where we can electrify our fleet, we do. But you're right. For the long haul trucks, the semis, we don't actually own any of those. Those are mostly Casella vehicles. But there are others going up there as well, MBI and a lot of transfer trailers. So I think our best thing that we can do is to continue to advocate on your behalf to further electrify the fleet. That does get into concerns with the ability of the grid to handle mass electrification, and I'm sure folks of the council on the select board have heard about that issue as well. It's infrastructure, but we agree, and where we can electrify, we do. As far as waste reduction, that's one of our primary activities. Is first to educate and inform and help people realize new ways to reduce the amount of waste that they're generating in the first place. That is the goal. We're one of those entities that actually wants to get smaller. We don't really want to grow. We want to get much smaller. And so that is the first line of defense, is wherever anyone can reduce their impact, we want to help them figure out ways to do that. And that means different things for different people. But I will continue to bring, and Jen works a lot with our delegation at the State House, to bring this information to them and to provide additional incentives for electrification, particularly for those larger vehicles, because they do have a significant impact.
Sarah? Any other questions or comments from the public, either online or in the room?
One comment, the solid waste management fee we talked about is going up. And as we become better at recycling, the amount of solid waste gets reduced, and therefore the amount of money that we bring in because of the reduction in the solid waste is less. And so and Chittenden County is by far and away the best recycler in the state. I mean, nobody comes close to what they're doing with respect to recycling.
Any other comments online or in the room from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Any further discussion?
At this time, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the CSWD's proposed FY25 budget.
Thank you, Don. Is there a second?
Second.
You, Ethan. Discussion on the motion? You okay, Ethan?
I don't know.
Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Sarah, thank you so much for being here. Alan, thank you.
Thanks, Alan.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. You're welcome. It's fun.
The next item we have on our agenda, discussion potential action on assignment of fiscal year 24 National Opioid Settlement Funds. Greg, do you or Marguerite want to give an opening?
Yep, so this is, we had this come up last year. These are the funds that have come through the opioid settlements at the national level and then through Vermont. and the town has opted to receive these. And specifically for this fiscal year 24, we have approximately $10,000 that have come in through these funds, and they are currently, it's up to the select board to decide how you would like to spend them, use them. And in that, of course, there are some, you need to stay in line with some of the stipulations. The easiest way to say that is that it needs to deal with abatement and remediation, and then within that there are specifics within that that we can all look into if there are other things that come up, but that is the goal of these funds. And so for tonight, I have put in this memo some ideas here that the select board could consider, and one of them you'll see at the bottom is if it is a topic that the select board would really like to discuss more in depth or spend some time or have staff look at some other things, we could potentially talk about it on May 8th during your priorities and planning for the next year or years out. Just depending on the scope of what your discussion is tonight. The other thing to just consider as you discuss that is that there is no timeline to spend these funds. And I did include in here the projected allocations that came through the National Opioid Settlement folks at the national level. And this is something that you could wait for each of these receipts every year and then spend it at the end of it. You could spend it in the middle. There is no timeline. So that's just something to consider in your discussions about fiscal year 24 and what we are currently discussing, the $10,142.74.
Discussion.
I have several. So in reading the opening for discussion, it was my understanding that we were transferring that original money to the police department to help with the Howard Mental Health Services. That was my understanding of where that money was going to go. But in here, you're saying it was used for towing and shredding and translation. Well, I guess translation expenses would fit, but I'm a little confused there as to how that helped with our mental health services.
Yeah, let me clear that up. No, so that went to the budget line that includes all of those, but all $37,954 was paid to community outreach, which is the Howard Center.
And so, and that would increase the community outreach budget so they could help us more than they had originally
Right.
planned.
Yes.
And is that happening?
That I would have to speak to Ron to. In the sense of fiscal year 23, they can only help as much as they're available, is my understanding.
Did we increase the amount to them, or that was the amount we paid them to get the service? That was our contract based on the amount. We used the opioid funds to.
Yeah, so we added to that line. Ron can speak to how the usage of that could play out, essentially. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so they have community outreach has a contract with us for, I believe it goes for at least another 1 or 2 years, and they set those amounts ahead of time.
Okay.
These funds were allocated to pay for that contract with community outreach. They have increased their services just in the last 6 months. They've increased that from just during Monday through Friday. They're now covering weekends as well. So they have increased the amount of services that they're providing us.
Okay, I still don't understand where towing and shredding come in that though.
Like,
Sorry.
no problem.
I don't get it.
So what Marguerite was saying is professional services for us is the line item, and that includes community outreach. That's where we pay for community outreach under professional services. Also under that line item is towing services and other services like translation and that kind of thing. So it's all under that same thing. If you look in Questica now, we've had that split out since we started using Questica. We've had that split out, so that way those things are in a separate subcategory.
Go and look at it then.
Yes, those are in a separate subcategory of professional services.
Okay.
And community outreach, I believe, has its own.
Given that, and when I came this evening, I really would like to see this money put towards having a forum involving the town and city, Essex Westford School District, Essex PD, and maybe Howard Mental Health, to have a community forum, to do a presentation on the drug issues here in town, to do a presentation on Narcan. I'd like to see more Narcan available in different spots here in the town. I'd like to see, especially for parents training. As a parent, I have no idea what fentanyl would look like. Or what it, I mean, I know it kills. I got that part. But I think we need to get more community outreach out to people to let them know what's happening, what could happen, what to tell your kids about. And I just think this money should go towards that this time instead of where it went last time. I believe we've really got to get the word out there because it is an issue. People are dying. And that's what I would like to see happen.
Others.
I would just ask if the funds that we are putting towards community outreach, additional funds, plus our regular contract, plus we also apply for 1%. Are we getting our money's worth?
I don't know about the 1% that they apply for. I'm not sure if they are one of the applicants for that Howard Center. I'm not sure if they're one of the applicants for that. They are? Okay. I'm not on that committee, so I don't know that. I would tell you we get our money's worth from them, and how. They are overworked and underpaid, and they come to our rescue a lot. Our officers depend on community outreach as much as they depend on anyone else. They are partners with us. They work in our office. They respond with our officers to calls, and they do the things that we shouldn't be doing. We dispatch calls directly to community outreach. We've done that for the last 2 years, where our dispatchers actually will dispatch or send a call to community outreach instead of having a police officer answer that call. So I would tell you that they are invaluable, and I think every other chief in Chittenden who has their services would tell you the same.
It's my opinion, for what it's worth, is that you are the frontline operators of them, that this money is most effectively spent there. That's my opinion.
Yeah, if I can offer my opinion on that, I would tell you that in my estimation, the payments that were made as a result of this settlement were made because of the effects that were caused on the American people by the drug companies, and some of that money is coming back to the taxpayers now for money that they have spent over the years for abatement and that type of thing. The reason why we gave money to community outreach this last time was because in our opinion, there is no more effective way of actually getting assistance and assisting people who actually need it. I can't say that I disagree with a community forum. I think that would be a positive thing to do. I'm not sure whether we could spend $10,000 on a community forum.
Well, I didn't mean to spend it all. I just like to see that.
Or assign it to that. I think a community forum would be a good thing, and I'd be more than happy to share some of my knowledge as to what drugs look like and what their effects are for that. I think that would be a good thing. I don't know if assigning this money to that is where it needs to go, but certainly if that's what the board decides to do with it, then I'm sure there'll be ways to spend that.
Ethan, Andy?
Yeah, I could certainly get behind the community forum thing, but I think we need more information about what it would entail, and given that there's no timeline for spending it, I think that's something we can take some time to figure out. As far as the Howard Center community outreach thing, we've fully funded that for the coming years, or is this money needed for that, or is it?
Well, it's already budgeted. It will, I assume, will be in years to come be budgeted funds for community outreach.
Mm-hmm.
Those funds will still be there. At least I hope so. So this money would go to, if we were to use this money, it would supplant funds that were going to go to community outreach. And those funds could be used for other things, maybe a community forum or whatever that is.
Can't do that.
You can't do that? Okay.
That's the whole issue.
That's why we have finance
That's right.
people.
That's why we have finance. No, it would have to supplement, which is
Right.
what we've done. It'd have to add to that budget line. You could not touch the budget line, which is what has happened. The budget line has been raised. It has stayed the same. So you'd want to make sure you don't do that and that you supplement that funding.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And I mean, I get exactly, what you're thinking. So in that sense, I think it would be wanting to make sure that we could get the use of community outreach to have that impact. But again, there's no timeline, so I do think it could be something you could watch. We could see, we could figure out if that's,
Right.
what that would look like or how that might look in the future years. We probably won't be the only ones having this issue around us either. So.
And also, I would say that the other option that Marguerite gave to you in the memo was to return the money back to the state. And the state is really, the state of Vermont and the Department of Health is really the hub and the actual experts at opioid abuse abatement and treatment. They provide us with our Narcan, and most of the facilities that are getting Narcan that comes through the state, that's paid for by federal dollars or state dollars. So these funds can be returned back to the state, and they can be used by the state for those types of things as well. I would tell you that the police department certainly doesn't, and in my estimation, I don't think the town has the capacity to run our own, Narcan program or something like that. We would be buying, or we would be getting those, Narcan from the state, usually for free.
Question.
Yeah, so I'm just looking for some clarification on what money is actually available, because I think it says here in the memo that we've already anticipated 8186 for FY25, so we've already essentially assigned FY25 money
It's miscellaneous revenue currently.
in our budget, so that money isn't the money that's available. It's FY24 money that we have not yet allocated that we're.
Right. We will have to. We haven't gotten it to FY25 yet, so I was,
Right.
I was expecting to work with Dan a little bit on that once that comes up, and bring that forward. Depending again also on maybe the scope of what the select board decides it would like to do. But right now we have the 10,000, and it is, sitting there, and it's not in, a revenue line specifically, as we knew when we did the budgeting for fiscal year 25, we had seen that was going to come in, so we did put it in the revenue line for miscellaneous revenue. So I do want to make sure that as we get there is handled correctly for that money.
Right. Okay. Right. I was just gonna say I'm still good with figuring out more what a forum might look like, what it might cost, kind of schedule it could go on. I know the school board is probably struggling right now with trying to get their budget in line, but you certainly could reach out to them.
Quick question, Chief. You indicated that Howard Center added more days, more hours. Would that stay under the current line item, or do you suspect that those hours would sort of revert back to what they were should these funds not be supplemented?
I think they're going to stay where they are. At least I hope that's the case. I do suspect that when this contract that we currently have comes up, and I believe it's in 25, don't hold me to that, I believe it's in 25, I would imagine that number is probably going to go up to reflect the people that they've had to hire since then, because they've had to hire at least one or two more folks here in Chittenden to be able to give us those extra hours.
Thanks. Any other questions, or Andy? Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we're whole for this year, right? Are we whole for this year? For FY24?
Yes.
So are we using FY23 money to?
No, we spent all of the fiscal year 23 settlement funds for community outreach in fiscal year 23. The 37,000 went to community outreach. So right now we have 10, and And I have, let me look at the menu.
But we budgeted enough for
We did.
FY24.
Without them adding hours, I'm not sure what it looks like with additional hours. Does that make?
Okay, so we may still be short of what we think we would really like to have, and maybe that's a balance we need to figure out. Is there any additional that could be used for a public forum? Okay, that's more information. Yeah, that would be helpful.
Community outreach or Howard Mental Health hasn't indicated that they were going to increase anything in this budget year. They haven't informed us of anything like that.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, so if there are no other questions or comments from the board, I'm going to ask for public comment, questions. I see Lorraine Zaloom's hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions, Chair. I'm trying to understand because the memo was just because it's the line item includes a number of other things in professional services. Do you know what our total cost of and the other confusing thing is community outreach. We have a community outreach officer, so that's confusing if the community outreach is actually just Howard Center. Is community outreach just Howard Center first call? In the format? Community affairs. Okay, thank you. And then, so did we spend, do you know what the total was for community outreach? When we allocated that 37.5 thousand was for community outreach? And do you recall what we had allocated before we added the opioid settlement funds? So we didn't add to the funds, we supplanted funds. So we supplanted funds. That's what I thought. So the other question, from my math in my head, the way I understand it is if we had already allocated 37 or we had allocated 42 or whatever it was that we had allocated, then we could have, then when you're drawing that down, that should be adding to the calls, not just 11,000 more or whatever it was. You know, that's the way I understand supplanting, but maybe I'll ask the legislative council because I just, but that was for professional services though. That's not just community outreach. It's the way I was, right? I mean, right? Wasn't it all in one line item and wasn't that professional services ending up at 109 or whatever it was?
103.50.
103.
Because it went from 65.96 to 103.50, but the my understanding, the way I read it, was $37,000 was used as the community outreach money because we needed $46,000 and there was only $11,000 from the taxpayer. We didn't take 37,000 out. It was never budgeted that way. It was budgeted
That's what I'm
to
asking.
use the
What
funds.
did we budget before we got that money?
So we budgeted more than we used, but we didn't reduce the budgeted
amount.
line item by
Right.
the settlement, which would meet the definition of supplant.
Right.
Is that correct?
So the yeah, I think if you want to answer that,
I'll I'll go to the state and I'll ask. That's all right. I'll move on. The other question is, in terms of understanding what it is that we're trying to do we have metrics? Because the only thing I can find online compared to like Burlington has a very robust system for showing if what we're doing is working or helping or reducing. Do we have a way, or do we have any type of data collection or any type of dashboard, or we have any plans for a dashboard? So like Burlington, so that we can actually see if where we're putting the money is actually helping reduce harms from opioids. Burlington, if you look, has the fire department does reporting. I believe I have a hard time believing that our fire department can also do some reporting locally. I keep being told to go up to the county level. That's not my job. I want someone from our town to tell me what it is. I don't understand how to tackle a problem without quantifying it first, and to understand where to throw money at it without knowing if what we're doing is helping. So are there any plans to like create dashboards, or at least kind of reach out to Burlington and see, because Burlington actually is seeing a reduction in the opioid overdoses. And hopefully that we can learn from them too. And also Howard Mental Health is struggling too as of March. I don't know if people saw the reporting, but they're really struggling with staffing as well. So in terms of relying on them, I want metrics to be able to understand our return on our investments.
Chief, do we have metrics from PD at least?
We can pull data, and we have been doing that, and I think I provided it to Lorraine a couple of times here, at least once that I remember, in regards to our number of drug calls involving drugs, overdose, and those types of things. We don't in-house. We keep data as far as like how many overdoses that we go to and how many deaths that we have. To verify those, we have to go to the state level. We have to go to the medical examiner's office in order to be able to get that data for sure. When it comes to, and what she's talking about is correct. What she's talking about is getting medical data and that type of thing. We do not have access to that. That has to go to the state level. And the Department of Health keeps those kinds of statistics. It's difficult for us as a town to be able to obtain those, other than having to call them. There is no metric, there is no mechanism for us to just be able to pull that up easily. So what she and what Ms. Zalum is talking about in Burlington is, and what they're doing is working down there, and they're keeping their own data and that type of thing. Honestly, I do not believe we have the same problem that Burlington does. So I'm not sure whether we would have enough data to even make that worth the effort. I'm not sure. I know that we do have issues, but I'm not sure we have the same issues that Burlington does.
So understanding, and I do understand that we're in public comment at this point. I'm going to take a minute here. It shouldn't come as a surprise that, like, I'm a pretty data-driven person. Understanding that you can't report on the outcome, but are you able to report on suspected overdose? Understanding that you can't classify it until it gets to the Department of Health, but is there the potential for that?
Currently, in the system that we were using, which is called Valcor, we do not have a mechanism that allows us to say this was a confirmed overdose. We don't have a way of checking a box or something like that, because there's lots of other things that factor into it. Sometimes we don't get called to a medical call that might turn into an overdose. It might be one that we didn't realize. So there's a lot of variables that go into that as to whether, and again, whether that's a medical issue that's caused by a drug or whether it's caused by something else. Our officers aren't trained to be able to do that. So it gets difficult for us to be able to try to track those statistics. I think what Burlington is doing is they're combining some of the data from their police department and some from the fire department to try to do that. But they have a full-time paid fire department as well.
Okay. So I'm going to hold and go back to the public, because I do have other questions or comments. Gina.
Hi. First, I appreciate that this is on the agenda. I think that is fantastic. I think it's something we have to face as a community, and we have an opportunity to do this with settlement funds that does not, it won't come out of our taxpayer pockets, so that is fabulous. I agree with Dawn that I don't think it would cost $10,000. I don't know what kind of meal we would also put on with a forum, but we could have a forum. I would like to loop in the junction and see what they're thinking. The school board, once the budget settles down, because my huge concern is as things are happening in the south of the country and moving up, I'm seeing stories in Texas where fentanyl's getting into weed. Kids are buying drugs off Snapchat. I know my kids get solicited on Snapchat where people can pull right into your driveway, sell drugs, go in their bedrooms, and do whatever they think they bought, which might not be what they think they bought. I have a friend, someone I know who grew up in Essex. She now lives in Wisconsin. That's exactly how her daughter just passed within the last year. They were watching TV and their daughter died in the bedroom. If I would like to have some sort of awareness where we have a forum, we talk about what does an overdose look like, have Narcan on hand, that if anyone wants it, we can reduce some of the stigma, and everyone should have it. No one can Narcan themselves. Someone has to administer it. Especially if you're a parent, you're going to want that, and you're probably going to want more than one. You're probably going to want 3 or 4 in your house in case that happens by mistake. We have been handing it out at Aunt Dot's, and we have not had one single issue. Nothing bad has happened. In fact, I sat in the office with a client. He said to me with tears in his eyes that it saved his friend's life. So I know we saved at least one life from handing out Narcan. That makes it worth it. And so that's that. I do hope we have a forum. And I have people I can reach out to, state senator, senator legislators. There's people in the school that were interested. There were other community leaders very interested in doing that. So hopefully we can get that together. For the finances, I sent you an email back, just with the specific questions about, I would like to know what was the remainder, because it said, so the total of that line item ended up being 103,000. We used 37,000 of it plus 11,000. I hope we paid Howard Mental Health Services 48,000, but then it said it rolled the remainder into the general fund. So I sent an email with specifics about totals. If you could reply to that, that would be great. And I hope we move forward with this. Thank you.
Any other public comment, either in the room or online? Lorraine?
Sorry, just to circle back, because just for clarification, I'm confused because when I look at the police log every week, there's been an overdose almost every week, and some deaths. I don't understand if we can put that in the police log, so I'm not comprehending why that isn't just part of a dashboard then, in terms of what you're saying. And certainly because my son went through it, I know there's a lag time as well in terms of toxicology, but that came back after a month and a half, so it was confirmed. So, there is certainly ways that we can collect that data. And I just think it's super important that we can quantify the issue, because maybe, like you're saying, Chief Hogue, maybe it isn't that big of an issue, but certainly some of the high school kids waiting for the bus, seeing a needle, someone shooting up at the bus center. There's other issues like that. Certainly in Autumn Pond, I see some regular issues down there. I would like to see that we work with some of the landlords as well, that have some regular issues with drugs trafficked in and out of their apartments. And some of them are supported by our tax dollars as well. Whether we can work on maybe getting landlords to be a little bit more responsible as well, to reduce some of the police impacts, and maybe even require them to put cameras in their common hallways or in their pointing out to the parking lots and common areas. I think there's ways that we can help also reduce some of that. Part of the reason I want to make sure that we're reducing the impacts of the opioid crisis, which most of the crisis started because of prescription drugs, not because of drug use that was illicit. I worry about the impacts on our police officers as well, because it's traumatizing to them too. Just that has a lot of impacts all around, that I want to make sure that we're measuring what we're doing and figuring out how to measure that and making sure to put that out to the community so we know and we're not guessing if there's a problem or not. That's, I want data. So, and I think that we could probably do it. If I see that we're already putting overdose in the police log, I'm not understanding that. Thanks.
Thanks, Lorraine.
Can I answer a couple of things there? So when you see that in the police log, the title of the call comes from the initial guess of what the dispatcher takes the phone call. So when they take the phone call, they're listening to the person and what they tell them is the problem. They title that in the case as to what they think that it is. So if they say, we think the person might be overdosing, that's what it goes in there as. If the officer responds or medics respond and it turns out to be something different, that still lives on as that case title. So what we want to do though is, and to have most accurate data, is to actually verify what that actually was. That's where we have the issue with the systems that we have, is that we have to go back in there and recode that and make sure that we're updating it. And there is no quick way for the officer to just be able to say that it was, drug caused. The best way that we've been able to do that, and this is what I've tried to share with Lorraine, is to be able to pull out data from calls where the officer said this type of drug was involved. And there is a mechanism to do that, and the officers are good about doing that. So we can pull call numbers as to how many drug cases that we've had that the officer actually said there were drugs involved. So that's the most accurate way that I've found so far, and I've been trying to provide that. So.
Thank you.
Seeing no comment from the public, I'll bring it back to the board. Do we feel as though we're ready to take some action, or I know we identified some items that we would like to see more information on?
I'd just like to say that I've heard it now from the board and the public about, and our police chief, about how important the Howard Center is. And I would be very reluctant to pull any of these funds from them. And if we do, I would plan on putting them directly back in from the general fund. Because I think if we're going to plan something else, great. But I don't think taking money away from the Howard Center is the answer. I just wanted to leave that comment.
Ethan?
We're not really taking it away, though. We haven't spent it yet. We haven't given it to anybody yet. This is new money. Right?
Yeah, they operate on a certain amount each year.
No, I get that. Okay.
Other comment?
They don't have enough expertise. I rely on the experts. I think that it's either the state or professional need the money.
Comments?
Nothing I haven't already said.
Okay. So it sounds like, to recap, we'd like some more information on the dollar amount, what would be envisioned for a community forum, as far as time, collaboration with other entities. It would be nice to understand the amount of the Howard Center costs that are already in the budget, as opposed to, what more would get us. As well as, I'll throw a plug in, Dawn, you mentioned more Narcan. Would it be possible to get a cost out for, I know they have like machines to house them, just for informational purposes. And then I'd love to dive down the rabbit hole of, metrics and data and systems line thinking, but I don't think that $10,000 is going to cover that. So, worth a conversation. But Greg, Marguerite, do you have what you need as far as what needs to? Okay. The only other question I have is, would we like to continue this discussion at the strategic planning meeting, next select board meeting? Whenever it falls on an agenda.
Either way, whatever works. Yeah.
Okay.
That's May 8th, so we have time. I was gonna say if I had didn't have enough time to get that information, but.
Okay. So we will see that on a future agenda. And we will move along in our current agenda, discussion on fiscal year 2024 general fund budget actual for March.
Thank you,
Chief,
Ron.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a
Chief.
good evening.
And welcome, Dan.
And that gentleman that interviewed for trails, conservation trails, I think left his jacket. So
Oh.
just in case. Sorry.
All right, good evening, everyone. Within this week's packet is a summary of our general fund activity through 3 quarters, and a 3-page memo kind of preceding the actual numbers that were in our system a couple weeks ago, representing the end of March. Generally speaking, we've spent 11.2 million of our general fund budget through March out of 15.4 million. So that's right around 73%, which is pretty much on target for our spending since we're 3 quarters through the year. I can kind of walk through each department if you'd like. I mean, I know it's outlined here, or I can focus on a couple key areas. Either way is okay for me.
What are the most areas you're most concerned about?
So there are really not too many areas of great concern. Most of the departments are within range, 70-75% spending. I think, Public Works has some flexibility since we've had a little bit of a lighter winter, and we have the opportunities maybe to get into summer construction and make some choices in that area. Aaron's provided me with kind of a quick list, which I refer to in here, just briefly to talk about traffic control, sidewalk maintenance, summer construction items. So I think that's, one of the key areas where it'll have the biggest influence on the budget going forward and how we land at the end of fiscal year 24.
There seemed to be some concern about the maintenance issues in, was it Public Works or was it the fire department that had under budgeted what they needed for maintenance or repairs for equipment?
I think
Not that it looked like there was more unexpected repairs needed than had budgeted for, wherever I was reading it.
right, I think that was in fire.
Is
Dan
that
can weigh in. It
fire
might have been in
department?
Public Works too. It's budgeting's it's an estimate. we start 18 months before the fiscal year starts. We try to look at basically just talking about data. We try to look back towards the past few years and what are we spending? What's the average? Do we have any projections that we're going to need to spend more this year or less this year on whatever category it is? You've all talked as a board before about is it time to update the vehicle replacement schedule in the capital plan? That's a large conversation about are we funding capital properly? What's the right replacement schedule? What's the the costs of spending more upfront for new vehicles versus putting money into repairs? There's not a quick and easy answer to that. I don't have a specific answer for you for fire.
That's okay. I thought I saw that there was a concern somewhere, but
Yeah.
go ahead. I didn't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt, Dan.
Yeah, there was a bit within the fire department. You're right. There's a repair and maintenance overage in there. I think, kind of generally speaking, Parks and Recreation is really on target. There are some items that are fully spent, but that's based more on kind of seasonality. And now we have to turn around and open the pool again.
Yeah.
So there'll be things that are quite seasonal there. My department shows a little bit over, but our insurance payments for VLCT, which are about $55,000 quarterly, are fully expensed in there already. So that's a piece that shows up in there. There are other areas where it looks like it's overspent a little bit because of, for example, county and regional functions. When we make disbursements, we pay out a full year or a full half year at a time. So we're paying, things in advance. They're just going to show up in our books as fully spent. Ron's from the police department has said all his vehicles are in. So usually that's been a tougher issue to handle the management in terms of the shipping and the expected delivery times in those areas. So those have had influences on our budget and our final number of spending as well.
And I had one more. IT and subscriptions seem to be up too.
Yeah, subscriptions, I think we've been trying to manage where some of those land. IT takes a bulk of those technology subscriptions in their department. I think, over time we've been trying to figure out if some of those belong in different areas. But yeah, in general, their budget's, overall still underspent by a decent amount as well.
Thank you.
I just had a comment. I'm sure everybody knows what it is, but vehicle rentals are already higher than expected. In Public Works, to clarify.
You mean equipment or vehicle?
It
So,
says vehicles, but it's really equipment, vehicles.
Yeah, it's the rental of vehicles and equipment line item within Public Works. So I did do a little bit of digging around to see what types of expenses were driving that. I see there's been a couple instances of a chipper rental, an excavator, a couple weeks worth of a lift. I don't know the details of
What it is.
when or why it was implemented, but those are the cases that I'm seeing. Yeah.
I just wanted to bring attention to the pattern that I brought up during budget.
Yeah.
But I did have one question for you, and I was curious as to, since this is budget related, but how are the money markets that we're using now returning? I was happy to see the request for the Vermont Federal. I was just curious as to how the money markets we're using now returning.
Yeah. So to kind of,
I might have missed it.
no, it wouldn't be in here because this is really an expense-focused piece. But the basic information on our interest income for the year is that we've allocated $274,000 of that interest to the general fund. Overall, we've earned about $535,000 for the year, with some of that obviously going to water sewer fund, capital fund, and ARPA fund when it had more money allocated, before the November purchase of land. So, those elements will help to offset any overages that occur here, even though generally speaking, we're not on pace for any type of very dramatic overages looking at a department level.
Awesome. Thank you. Those are my only two things I had written down.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I just want to thank Dan and everybody for the report. Your synopsis is great because you can look at it and it gives you a good picture as a board member of we're right about 3/4, so you could see if we had major expenses and anything, we could see it. So it's great, and you provided all the details. So if somebody wants to dive into every line item, can. It does push me to hope that the board will look at the fund balance policy at some point in the near future.
I'm good, thanks.
Okay. With no other board questions or comments, I'll turn it over for public comment. Seeing none. Dan, thank you for coming in.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Nice
Dan.
job. Thank you.
Our next agenda item, update on Select Board fiscal year 24 strategic planning project. So this is looking back on what we did last year and progress made over this past fiscal year. Greg, Marguerite, do you have any updates or?
Sure. Sort of just to check in, similar to the finances, we want to get in the habit of sort of doing some quarterly updates. I think most of them will probably just be written in the reading file. Getting into the third quarter, we wanted with finance and with the strategic plan, work plan update to present it to you in person, have any discussion that's necessary. But no, I think we're in good shape. We've accomplished quite a bit from your work plan last year. It's also a chance to think ahead to the May 8th meeting and what's next. How do we build off some of this stuff? What's off the table that we don't need to continue anymore? Some of the stuff is not complete yet, but it's in progress. AFSCME negotiations, for instance, are on that list. We're in negotiations now. And happy to answer questions about any of this stuff, but otherwise it's a memo and hopefully a good representation of what we've done and how we've gotten there.
It's a good way to remind us too.
Board member questions or comments? Seeing none, any questions or comments from members of the public on last year's strategic plan? Okay, and that brings us to the end of what would have been our business items, but we do have consider approval of manager reappointment of Elizabeth King to the Cemetery Commission.
And I just wanted to make the comment, and all the appointments kind of showed it through the meeting, is that we should develop a policy with a time frame if we're going to extend our appointments. So that the only reason I wanted to bring this up is that great that the residents are volunteering, and I think that they should be noted in a public meeting by itself as opposed to consent.
Speaking of Elizabeth and I guess Kendall, to your point, we've been doing stuff in practice, but I guess it hasn't been written down in policy as to how and to reappoint folks. This is in keeping with practice, the reappointment of Elizabeth King. It's a town manager appointment because of the charter.
Yeah.
And manager's appointment with approval of the select board. Ms. King, so the Cemetery Commission, it's 3-year terms. Those terms are actually, they expire at the end of March. So her term was up, kind of slipped through the cracks in this case to advertise sooner, so we wanted to make sure that 30 days went past. King had applied, and I spoke to her a couple weeks ago. Nobody else has applied, so very comfortable recommending her for reappointment. She brings great background, great perspective to the Cemetery Commission, how they can handle things with a focus. So fully confident to reappoint her, and it has been posted for those 30 days, and it's filling a term that is currently expired, or refilling her, reappointing. So it's in keeping with practice.
I just think in these days when it's hard to get volunteers, that when somebody volunteers to serve the town, I the individual recognized as opposed to just on a consent.
At this point, I would entertain a motion if someone is so.
So moved. I move that we appoint.
Thank you, Kendall. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Andy. Any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. Additionally, we have consider reappointment of tree warden. Kendall, same.
Exactly the same.
Okay.
That's
And
a
how
volunteer
long-
position.
And how long has he been?
I don't have the number for you. I've been here for over 10 years, and Chuck Weil has been here for that entire time. I think he's been here for a long time before that. So I would say he's going on at least.
He's a relatively younger individual. He's not 87.
No.
I'm not sure of his age, but he's I believe he's retired from a career with the I think it's the Vermont Department of Forestry, and I'm not sure if he's worked elsewhere as well, but he's
Okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad I asked that question.
he has been great. He
I
knows
would-
his stuff. He's a resource. He shows up when called upon.
So I would suggest that maybe we start thinking about a deputy warden. My point on the tree warden is that it's one of those positions where it's never a problem and it's completely smooth until all of a sudden you decide you want to take down a tree that has issues. So and that experience that he has, it would be nice to have somebody learn on the job.
Kendall, at this time, I would entertain a motion. Thank you, Kendall. Is there a second?
Second. I'll take it.
Thank you, Andy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0. At this point, our last items are for executive session, so we will move forward to the reading file. Board member comments. I will make one comment around the select board strategic planning session. As Greg noted in the memo, really want to think at the high level, the macro level, be down into the micro level. We want to be thinking like 5 years out at that macro level, and basically then fill in the gaps with the individual items on work plans.
I have some comments on water and sewer budgets, capital. I noticed that there's an AC line to be replaced. I was surprised that that's not eligible because the state program that they actually make you test for water lines. You don't have. I would just look at that. Maybe there's some funding of that. I'll note that they talked about replacing some of the hydrants, and I would just hope that those are town hydrants that they would replace, not private hydrants. And as far as the 40th and Allen, that should definitely be on SRF eligible, but I would also, I've mentioned it before, and it kind of was off my radar, but now it is. A lot of places are getting congressional appropriations. Can't tell what will get a congressional appropriation without asking for it. Virgin's got 1.2 million to do their wastewater. I know it's another application for staff, but I think it's something that we can find some projects to apply, specifically water and sewer.
I do believe that we'll have a deeper discussion on those items as well on May 6th. So yes, thank you. And we'll talk about them next time too.
I know it's not a business item, but I was just curious if this is the current date for the GMT. I know they had problems where they were delaying. This is the new date.
This is the most recent
Okay.
one that I'm aware of.
Awesome. Appreciate that.
And I did actually go and download the app, so the app is available.
Okay. Awesome.
Progress.
Yep. The app is there in the store. So that brings us to the end of the reading file. Will we be, well, let's cover the executive session motions first.
I move that the select board make the specific finding that the general public knowledge of pending or probable, excuse me, civil litigation to which the public body is or may be a party would place the town at a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second? Thank you, Don. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0.
I move that the select board enter into an executive session to discuss pending or probable civil litigation to which the public body is or may be a party pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1E to include the town manager and deputy manager.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Andy. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries 5-0.
We have one more because we wanted to talk about
We
Housing
do.
Commission, right?
Yep.
Okay, I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss the proposed public official appointment in accordance with 1 VSA section 313A3 to include the town manager and the deputy town manager.
Thank you, Andy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ethan. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. For the record, I didn't vote, but I'm voting yay, so motion carries 5-0. Sorry. And it does look like we will be coming back after executive, so we will do the setup here and be back after we're done.